"This isn't a military base, Mr. Carter. You're fired. Effective immediately." Victoria Sterling's voice sliced through the noise of the shop, sharp as broken glass. Every impact gun and air hose seemed to go quiet at once. Jamal Carter froze over the open hood of a brand new SUV, his dark hand steady on the pressure gauge. He'd rigged with a worn green hose and a brass fitting that looked older than most of the cars in the bay. Hot air and the smell of oil wrapped around him, but a colder feeling hit his chest. He straightened up slowly, wiping his palms on his coveralls, black curls damp with sweat under his cap. "Ma'am," he said, trying to keep his tone respectful, "I still got the afternoon shift. I can finish this transmission. I need the hours. My daughter's medicine." Victoria flicked her eyes to the strange setup he'd built off the transmission line. "You're using an unapproved method with a customer's $70,000 SUV, she said. "I saw the video from the floor cams. That is not in any Sterling manual. Hand in your badge and get off my property." You could have heard a wrench drop. In the next bay, Walter, the oldest mechanic, went still under a pickup, his boots sticking out like exclamation points. The younger guys leaned on tool carts, watching like it was a show. Nobody stepped in. Rules were rules, and Victoria Sterling, 31 and ice from heels to haircut, did not bend rules. Jamal swallowed hard. His throat felt too tight. "The manual test misses hairline leaks," he said quietly. "This method finds them faster. It's how we did it." Before his words faded. No way he was telling her about fixing helicopter hydraulics in the dark with bullets singing past. The Sterling logo on her white hard hat flashed as she shook her head. "This isn't before," she said. "This is my shop. Pack up your tools." When Jamal opened his mouth again, the only words that came out were a whisper. "Nia's inhaler runs out Friday." Victoria turned away like she hadn't heard, her heels clicking across the concrete as she walked back toward the glass hallway that led to her office. To her, the conversation was over. Problem removed. The others drifted back to work, but the air felt wrong, as if someone had turned down the oxygen. Jamal walked to a station, each step heavier than the last. His green toolbox sat against the far wall, paint scratched and dented. A faded white stencil barely visible under years of grime. Once it had read, U.S. Navy, then a serial number. Now, only random letters showed. He popped the lid. Inside, every wrench and socket had its place, laid out the way they taught you on carriers, because if you left a tool in a rotor housing, people died. A small photo was taped inside the lid, turned face down. He didn't need to look. He knew it by heart. Him 10 years younger in a flight suit, arms slung around 2 other aircrew in front of a Seahawk helicopter, ocean wind in their faces. All 3 alive back then. Only one alive now. Jamal grabbed his things, stuffed his lunchbox and the picture into his duffel, his hands shaking only when he thought about the white bag at the pharmacy with Nia's name on it and a price tag he couldn't reach anymore. Walter limped over, wiping his own hands with a red rag that had seen better days. Deep lines cut across his brown face. "She shouldn't have done you like that, son," he muttered under his breath. "Not out here in front of everybody." Jamal forced a small smile. "It's her shop," he said. "We just turn the wrenches." Walter's gaze slid to the green toolbox. "That box ever been on a ship?" he asked quietly. Jamal's eyes flickered. "Something like that," he said. A younger mechanic, Jace, walked by and snorted. "Guess old school tricks don't impress the boss," he joked. "Man should have followed the book." Walter shot him a look. "That trick he did. That's Navy special warfare stuff," he said. "I've seen that setup before. Saved my life in '91. Jace rolled his eyes. "Here we go. War stories." He kept walking. Jamal closed the box, hands pressing flat on the lid for a long moment, like he was sealing up more than metal. Then he straightened, slung the duffel over his shoulder, and walked toward the big metal gate that led to the parking lot outside. Atlanta heat slapped him in the face. The sky was a hard blue, the kind that promised thunderstorms by evening. Jamal crossed the cracked asphalt, passing rows of shiny customer cars he'd kept running long after their owners should have thanked him. His old Civic sat by the fence, paint peeling, muffler hanging low. He paused halfway, the envelope with his final check crinkling in his back pocket. 2 days of pay, maybe 3 if they counted the morning. It wouldn't cover even half of Nia's asthma meds, let alone rent. He pictured her at school right now, coloring a worksheet, her inhaler in the cubby, with her name written in marker. The thought of calling the landlord made his stomach clench. He took a deep breath, the air thick with oil and summer. "One thing at a time," he murmured. "Pick up Nia. Figure out the rest later." He pushed through the gate onto the sidewalk. The first thump was so deep he felt it in his ribs before he heard it in his ears. A strange shudder rolled through the ground under his boots. Every window on the shop front rattled. Jamal's head snapped up without thinking. That sound wasn't thunder. It was rotor wash. Heavy, close. A big helicopter roared over the line of warehouses, gray belly flashing in the sun, twin blades chopping the air. People stopped on the street, shielding their eyes. The bird banked, slowed, then dropped lower. The wind from the rotors kicking up dust and loose paper in wild spirals across the lot. Jamal's body moved on its own, hauling him back a few steps to clear space as the Navy MH-60R Seahawk settled into the parking lot like it owned the ground. The big side door slid open with a mechanical hiss. A crewman in a helmet leaned out with a megaphone. His voice boomed over the screaming blades. "Sterling Automotive, this is United States Navy Special Operations. We are here for Lieutenant Commander Raven 6. Repeat, we are here for Raven 6. The whole shop froze. Mechanics poured out of the bay doors, hands over their ears, eyes wide. Customers inside the waiting room pressed faces to the glass. On the mezzanine walkway, Victoria Sterling stopped dead mid-stride, one hand still holding a clipboard. Her heart slammed into her throat. Raven 6, a codename she hadn't heard out loud since her father's old war stories. Jamal stood in the middle of the lot, duffel at his feet, eyes locked on the helicopter. For a second, time folded. The hot asphalt under his boots became the steel deck of a ship. The smell of oil became the sharp bite of jet fuel. Rain pounded some invisible canopy. Ghost voices in his head called out headings and altitudes. His jaw clenched. That name was buried on purpose. He hadn't heard anyone say it since the day he walked away from the Navy. "Mr. Carter," the crewman shouted, lowering the megaphone as he squinted. His gaze found the man in the oil-stained coveralls, who did not flinch while everyone else ducked. "Sir, we have orders from the Admiral. We need Lieutenant Commander Jamal Raven 6 Carter right now." Jamal's first instinct was to run, not to ward them away. Back to the Civic, back to the small apartment, where Nia's drawings covered the fridge. Back to the quiet life he had built with his bare hands and stubborn will. The rotors beat the air, whipping his shirt against his skin. He took one step back. Then he thought of another rotor sound, years earlier, and 3 names carved on a memorial wall because he hadn't been able to bring them home. He swallowed hard and planted his feet. "I'm not Navy anymore," he yelled up, voice rough. The crewman climbed down a rope ladder with the ease of 100 landings. Boots hitting asphalt in front of Jamal. Up close, the man's face was lined, older than Jamal by 20 years. He snapped to attention, then dropped the salute when he saw Jamal's glare. "With respect, sir, you'll always be Raven 6 to us," he said, leaning close so only Jamal could hear over the blades. "We've got a bird down in the Gulf. Pilots sending out a weak signal. Intel says you're the only one who can read this pattern. We're losing time." Behind them, Victoria finally found her voice. "What is going on?" she shouted, marching toward them, hair and papers whipping in the wind. Her heels slipped on the grit. She didn't care. All eyes followed her, the CEO walking straight into rotor wash like she was untouchable. The crewman turned. "Ma'am, with respect, we need your mechanic," he called. "We set up a secure feed in your conference room," Admiral insisted. He thrust a folder at her, the top page stamped classified in bold red letters. Through the clear plastic, she saw Jamal's name, rank, a grainy photo of him in a flight helmet. Her breath caught. The tired mechanic with oil under his nails stared back as a younger man, jaw hard, eyes sharp. Raven 6. Her father had once said, "There's this pilot they call Raven 6. Flew into places no sane person would go to pull our boys out." She'd forgotten the name. Or maybe she'd pushed it aside, along with everything that made her feel small. Now it stood right in front of her, in coveralls she had ordered out of her building an hour ago. Inside the glass-walled conference room that usually hosted boring budget meetings, screens glowed with maps and lines of numbers. Navy officers in khaki uniforms tapped on laptops, voices low and urgent. A satellite image of swirling blue and white filled the main monitor, a blinking dot lost in the mess. Jamal stood at the end of the table, arms crossed, shoulders tight. He had insisted on stopping by his apartment to drop off Nia with the neighbor upstairs before coming back, ignoring the crewman's protest about time. "If she wakes up and I'm gone without a word, she'll think I left like her mama," he'd said simply. That had shut them up. Now, back in the building that had just thrown him out, he stared at the data he hadn't seen in years. The Admiral appeared on screen from a command center somewhere far away, silver hair neat, dark eyes steady. "Raven 6, he said, voice deep. "Good to see you breathing." Jamal's jaw flexed. "Wish I could say the same for everyone else," he replied quietly. The Admiral's gaze softened. "We'll talk about that another time. Right now, we've got a Seahawk down. Call sign Falcon 3. You flew this route 15 times. We can't find him. We need your eyes." Victoria stood pressed against the back wall, arms folded tight across her chest, trying to look like she belonged there. In truth, she felt 12 years old again, eavesdropping on her father's late-night Navy calls. Her company badges and polished shoes meant nothing in this room. She watched Jamal step closer to the screen, his whole posture changing. The tired slump he carried on the shop floor fell away. His back straightened, his eyes sharpened. "Play the radar sweep again," he said, voice calm. The tech hit a key. Green blips rolled across the digital ocean. Jamal squinted, leaning in. "Freeze at timestamp, 2 hours, 14 minutes and 9 seconds, he ordered. "Zoom 5 clicks on Sector 3 Bravo." The tech did. Nothing obvious showed. "Look at that dip in return strength," Jamal said, pointing. "Right there. That's not open water. That's metal, under chop, hugging low. He dropped in a canyon or reef. That's why you're not seeing a clean echo." The room went quiet. "You sure?" the intel officer asked. "We scanned that area twice." Jamal nodded once. "Pilots trying to ride the terrain to hide. It's what I would do with half a busted tail rotor and a belly full of scared men." He's alive. For now. 3 hours later, Falcon 3's crew sat in a medical tent on a carrier deck, shivering under blankets and laughing the wild, shaky laugh of men who thought they were dead and then weren't. One little girl somewhere in Norfolk slept with both parents home that night because of a man in oil-stained coveralls 1,000 miles away. In Sterling's conference room, when the Admiral's aide shouted, "We have them. Coordinates match," a cheer went up that shook the glass walls. Jamal closed his eyes for a second, shoulders dropping. A tiny piece of weight slid off his back. He still saw the 3 faces he hadn't brought home from that night long ago. But now, for the first time in years, the 14 he had saved felt a little louder. The Admiral leaned close to the camera. "You did good, Raven," he said. Again, Jamal swallowed. "I did my job," he answered. The Admiral nodded. And you've got another one now. Take care of that little girl of yours. We can run the skies without you. She can't. The screen went dark when the last officer had filed out, taking their laptops and tense energy with them. Only Jamal and Victoria remained. The room suddenly felt too quiet, the hum of the air conditioner loud. Jamal picked at a crack in the conference table's edge, his fingernail black with grease. He looked smaller without the screens, not because his body shrank, but because the weight of his regular life dropped back on his shoulders. You saved them, Victoria said softly, breaking the silence. You saved all those men? He shrugged one shoulder. I helped, he said. The rescue team did the hard part. She stepped closer, guilt burning in her chest. Up close, she saw the faint scar along his jaw, the tired lines around his eyes, the way his hand still barely trembled, like his body remembered holding a stick in a storm. I fired you this morning, she blurted, the words tasting like rust, in front of everyone, for doing your job better than the book. Jamal held her gaze. Yes, ma'am, he said. No anger, no fake smile, just truth. Something inside her cracked the hard shell she'd built since her father's heart. Attack dumped a whole company into her lap at 29. Every board meeting, every whisper about the girl who got lucky, every night she'd stared at spreadsheets until her eyes burned, had shaped her into someone who cut problems fast and clean. She had told herself it was strength. Looking at Jamal now, thinking of his daughter stepping into a pharmacy with an empty inhaler, it felt a lot more like fear. I didn't ask, she said quietly, where you learned that test, why you needed the hours. I just saw a risk and cut it. Jamal's lips twitched, almost a smile. Most bosses don't want to know, he said. Makes it harder when they have to do what they do. The words landed like a stone. She thought of the old mechanic Walter saying that man knows things we don't, and herself rolling past it mentally. She thought of her father's last words to her. Control everything or they'll take it from you. Maybe he had been wrong. Or maybe she had heard only the part that fit her fear. That night, after Jamal went home with a promise from the Admiral that the Navy would cover Nia's meds for the month, Victoria sat alone at her huge desk on the top floor and watched the viral video for the 10th time. Someone at the pharmacy had caught the helicopter landing and Jamal reading radar data like it was a children's book. 2 million views and climbing. Comments scrolled by. That CEO fired a hero. Boycott Sterling. How do you treat a man like that, like trash? Her stomach knotted. The board chairman's voice had already snarled in her ear an hour earlier. Fix this, Sterling, or we fix it for you. She had snapped back an old reflex. I will handle it. Then hung up and stared at the screen in shame. Fix it? How? Throw money at a PR firm. Offer Jamal a quiet settlement and hope he took it. None of that answered the real problem that now sat, glaring, in her chest, like a warning light on a dash dot in the morning. She did something she rarely did, called an emergency board meeting and told the truth. They sat around the long table, 8 older faces looking down their noses, or so it felt while she stood at the head. Yesterday, I fired the best mechanic in this company because I was more afraid of breaking a rule than I was of breaking a man, she said, voice steady, despite the tremor in her gut. That man also happens to be a decorated Navy pilot who saved 14 soldiers in combat. I didn't know that when I fired him. That's on me. Murmurs rose. One board member scoffed. Are we here for a feelings talk, Ms. Sterling? Or a solution? Before she could answer, the retired general at the end cleared his throat. I know Black Tide, he said. If this Carter is Raven 6, we're lucky he ever set foot in our shop. The room shifted. Eyes turned sharper, more interested. So, the chairman said slowly, what do you propose? Victoria took a breath. We bring him back, she said. Not as a line mechanic, as director of technical operations. We pay him what he's worth. We cover his daughter's medical care. and we build a training program around his methods. Our numbers will improve, yes. But more important, we show every person who turns a wrench for us that we see them as more than a worker ID. A chorus of protests hit at once. A director with no college degree. We'll look soft. We can't let floor staff think they can go viral to get a raise. The general raised a hand. Gentlemen, he said, I led men into battle. I've seen cowards with Harvard diplomas and heroes who couldn't read. If you want this company to stand for something besides profit, you start by honoring the kind of man who saved your sons and daughters. Silence fell. One by one, the hands went up. Approved. Barely, but enough. He may say no, the chairman warned. Then we accept it, Victoria replied, and we change anyway. She waited for Jamal outside Nia's school, feeling more nervous than she had before any earnings call. Kids poured through the doors, backpacks bouncing, parents waving. Nia came out last, hand in Jamal's little braids swaying. When she saw Victoria, she tugged her father's sleeve. Dad, it's the lady from the helicopter video, she whispered, loud enough for all three to hear. Jamal's jaw tightened. Miss Sterling, he said, careful, like he was walking on ice. What are you doing here? She swallowed her pride. I came to say I'm sorry, she said, and to ask if you'll let me try to fix even a small part of what I broke. She handed him a folder. He opened it, eyes scanning the pages. Title line, Director of Technical Operations. Salary that meant no more counting quarters at the pharmacy. A line about full health coverage for dependents. He looked up, stunned. This can't be right, he said. I'm just a mechanic. Nia frowned. You're not just anything, Dad, she said. You're Raven 6. The nickname sounded funny and brave in her small voice. Victoria smiled, a real, shaky smile she hadn't felt on her face in years. You're a leader, she said. You led men in the sky. You can lead a team on the ground, if you want to. Jamal stared at the paper, at his daughter, at the woman who had humiliated him in front of his friends. Why? He asked at last. Because social media yelled at you. She shook her head. Because I finally listened to the one old mechanic who's been trying to tell me who you are. Because I watched you choose your little girl over glory. Because this company needs someone who knows the difference between following a book and doing what actually saves lives. A group of parents lingered nearby, pretending not to watch. A week ago, Jamal would have shrunk from their eyes. Now he thought of the pilot, whose kids had their father because he'd opened his mouth. He thought of Nia's wheeze last night, softer, now that the Navy's voucher covered the good inhaler. He thought of the green toolbox waiting alone in an empty bay. He crouched, so he was eye to eye with Nia. What do you think, Star? He asked. Should Daddy work for Ms. Sterling again? Nia considered, serious. Will you be home for dinner? She asked. He blinked, surprised. More than before, he said. I won't have to work nights anymore. She nodded. Decision made. Then yes. But only if she promises not to shout at you in front of everybody again. Victoria's throat tightened. Deal, she said. You can shout at me in the conference room if I mess up. Nia giggled. You'll both be boss, she declared. Jamal stood, held out his hand. Victoria took it. For a second, the handshake felt like any business deal firm grip, eye contact. Then something shifted. It wasn't CEO to employee anymore. It was two parents who had both lost too much learning how not to lose what they still had. Months later, the shop floor at Sterling Automotive hummed with a new kind of energy. The same impact guns buzzed, the same lift arms groaned, but laughter came easier. On the main wall, a framed picture hung where everyone could see it. Jamal, in his dress whites, navy wings polished, flanked by his old crew. Next to it, a more recent photo showed him in a clean button-down, Nia on his hip, both of them grinning under a Sterling banner that read, We fix cars, we lift people, Mechanics gathered twice a week in Bay 3-4 Raven sessions, where Jamal taught them the pressure test and other field tricks. "The book is a start," he'd say, turning a wrench with quick, sure hands. "But listen. Listen to the engine, to the data, to each other. Don't be afraid to speak up if you see a better way." Victoria often stood in the back, taking notes. Once, when a young tech slipped and spilled oil all over a customer's rim, she felt the old urge to bark. Instead, she caught Jamal's eye. He shook his head slightly and walked over to show the kid how to clean it. No shame added. The job got done, and the kid's shoulders stayed straight. On a warm Friday, a low chop of rotor blades rolled over the building. A few mechanics flinched on instinct, looking up. Jamal glanced toward the sound, then back at the engine in front of him. "That one's headed to the airbase," he said. "Wrong pitch for a Seahawk." Walter chuckled. "You can tell by sound." Jamal grinned. "Some things you don't forget." Victoria watched the exchange from her office window, a soft smile on her lips. She thought of the woman she'd been the day she fired him tight as a coiled spring. Proud of never crying, proud of cutting fast. That woman had been strong in the way glass is strong, shining, sharp, and quick to shatter. She was learning a different kind of strength now, one that bent so it didn't break, one that could say I was wrong and not fall apart. Later that day, as the sun slanted low and the shop cleaned up, Naya raced in from the company daycare, backpack bouncing. "Dad," she cried, flinging herself into Jamal's arms. "We painted helicopters today." She held up a paper full of blue and gray swoops. Jamal lifted her high, spinning once as she squealed. "Looks better than my old bird," he said. Victoria walked over, wiping grease knot Hurst from her cheek where she'd helped change a tire earlier, just to feel the work in her hands. "Can I see?" she asked. Naya shoved the painting toward her. On the tail of the cartoon chopper, in shaky kid letters, was one word: Raven. "That's his secret name," Nia whispered proudly. "But it's not secret now. The whole world knows he's a hero." Jamal shook his head gently. "Heroes are the folks who show up every day," he said. "They just don't usually have helicopters yelling their name." Victoria looked at him, really looked, and felt that line settle into her bones. She glanced around the shop, the tired faces, the stained uniforms, the small jokes that kept people going when bolts stripped and customers yelled. She thought of boardrooms and helicopters, of viral videos and gossip, and all the ways people made snap judgments. She cleared her throat. "I used to think power meant being the one who could fire somebody," she said slowly. "Now I think it's about being the one who chooses to see them before it ever gets that far." Jamal nodded. "That's the only kind of power that lasts," he replied. Naya looked between them, confused but happy, swinging her legs in his arms. Outside, another helicopter moved across the sky, just a small shape against the blue. Nobody ducked. Nobody froze. They just watched it pass. A sound folded into a life that no longer needed hiding. And in that simple moment, standing in a greasy shop filled with ordinary people and extraordinary stories, it was clear that real strength is not the right to break someone from above, but the courage to truly see them and lift them up instead.